The lake shimmered in the gentle light of dawn, a silver mirror undisturbed by time or turmoil. Grandpa Earl sat at the end of the weathered dock, a shadow of calm in the stillness. His flannel sleeves were rolled just below the elbow, fingers deftly threading a nightcrawler onto a rusted hook. He hummed lower tune only he seemed to remember and cast his line with practiced grace. The bobber landed with a soft plop and began its slow drift. This was his sanctuary. This dock, this lake, this morning routine unchanged since before I was born. Willow Lake wasn't just a body of water, it was memory preserved. It bordered our backyard, nestled behind a modest log cabin built by Grandpa's own father, and sat just 100 feet from where I sipped coffee on the porch, watching the man who taught me everything about patience, silence, and fishing. It was supposed to be just another peaceful morning, until the voice cut through the quiet like a chainsaw through birch. "Excuse me, what do you think you're doing?" I squinted toward the commotion. A woman in a blindingly pink tracksuit stood rigid at the edge of our property, one foot on the grass, the other planted on the gravel path that circled the lake, clipboard in hand, lips pursed like she'd swallowed a lemon whole. Karen Whitmore, the new HOA president. Grandpa didn't even flinch. He adjusted his cap and leaned back on the old folding chair he kept bolted to the dock. "Good morning to you too, ma'am. This is a restricted area," she snapped. "You're in direct violation of HOA Ordinance 1 for unauthorized use of shared water features." Grandpa's eyes narrowed, but his voice remained steady. "This here dock's mine, has been since 1937. She flipped a page on her clipboard, nodding with performative severity. "I don't see your name on the registry of approved lake users. You'll need to remove yourself immediately or face a formal citation." I stood up from the porch, coffee forgotten. "Ma'am, you're on our property." Karen barely glanced at me. "The HOA bylaws state that the lake and its perimeter fall under communal oversight. That includes this dock if it extends into the HOA-governed zone." Grandpa let out a low chuckle. "Lady, my granddaddy carved this dock out of cypress. The only governing body back then was the Lord and the weather." Karen scowled. "Times change, rules evolve. This community has standards, and fishing poles on display aren't one of them." Without another word, she stormed off down the gravel path, heels crunching with indignation. "Think she's serious?" I asked, stepping beside Grandpa. He reeled in his line and sighed. "She's serious, all right, but she's wrong. Dead wrong." The knock came less than 15 minutes later. 2 sharp raps on the cabin's screen door. I opened it to find a patrol cruiser parked by the mailbox, red and blue lights flickering lazily in the morning sun. A uniformed officer stood there, hat in hand. "Deputy Harlan, Jake Earl." He greeted us, his tone caught between professional and apologetic. "We got a call about a trespasser on HOA property." Grandpa rose slowly from his chair, back straight as a fence post. "You here to arrest an old man for catching base in his own backyard?" Harlan rubbed the back of his neck. "I told her it was probably a misunderstanding, but protocol says I gotta check it out." Grandpa nodded toward the property markers clearly visible, embedded in stone. "My land ends 3 feet into the water. That dock's been McAllister property for nearly a century." Harlan knew it too. Everyone in the county did. But Karen had filed an official complaint. That meant paperwork. That meant escalation. That meant this wasn't going away. After a brief inspection and a few uneasy exchanges, Harlan apologized and left. But the damage had been done. The peace was gone. That night, I found Grandpa sitting on the porch, his fishing pole untouched. "By the door, she's gonna keep pushing," I said. He nodded, gaze fixed on the lake. "She thinks she can drown me in paper rules and petty power." But this lake's seen worse storms. Still, something had changed in him. The man who once rose before sunrise now lingered inside, eyes tired, shoulders heavy. And that's when I knew this wasn't just about fishing. It was about pride, about legacy, about standing your ground on soil your ancestors bled for. And if Karen wanted a war over water, she was about to learn that some roots run too deep to uproot. The morning after the police visit, a white envelope appeared on our doorstep. No stamp, no name, just a bold red sticker reading HOA notice. Violation. Grandpa didn't open it. He didn't have to. I did though, and the words inside hit like cold steel. Greater than citation. Unauthorized recreational use of HOA, governed lakefront, fine, $500, due in 10 business days. Failure to comply will result in escalating penalties and legal action. Below the threat was Karen's signature, each letter shaped like it had been carved with precision and malice. Grandpa didn't say much. He simply folded the notice and placed it in the old bread tin where he kept property taxes and fishing licenses, proof of his quiet, stubborn belief that documents mattered more than bullies. But Karen wasn't finished. Over the next few days, her assault intensified. We received another fine for unregistered aquatic equipment, a reference to the rusted rowboat that had sat overturned near the boathouse since the Clinton administration. A second letter cited our flagpole for non-standard elevation. And then came the real insult. An HOA-wide bulletin emailed to every neighbor, complete with bold fonts and passive-aggressive flair. Greater than residents are reminded to report any lakefront activity immediately. Safety and community standards depend on everyone doing their part. No exceptions. Attached was a photo of Grandpa sitting on his dock, fishing pole in hand, with the date and time stamped below. A surveillance shot. Deliberate. Targeted. Grandpa. I saw the email on my phone and stared at it for a long moment. Then he got up, walked outside, and quietly pulled down the American flag that had waved above the dock since I was a boy. That image, him folding it neatly, silently lodged in my throat like a fishbone. This wasn't about violations. This was about humiliation. I decided then and there that I wasn't going to let her drown him in paper threats, not without a fight. I started asking around the neighborhood. The Parkers down the road got a $200 fine for wind chimes deemed auditory pollution. The Greens were ordered to repaint their door community-approved beige after their grandson painted it sky blue. And poor Mrs. Hanley had her entire rose garden flagged for non-native flora. Karen had turned the HOA into her personal kingdom. The other board members, rubber stamps. She bullied, bulldozed, and browbeat her way through every meeting. If you didn't obey, she weaponized the bylaws like they were legal scripture. But not everyone bowed. At dusk, I visited Mr. Ramirez, a retired surveyor who'd lived on the lake longer than most of the homes had existed. He remembered when the McAllister property extended a full 15 feet past the dock. She's banking on fear, he told me, running a finger over faded maps in his garage. Most people won't fight back because they don't know how. But your grandpa's not most people. No, he wasn't, and neither was I. The next morning, I asked Grandpa for the property deeds. He didn't ask questions, just handed me a thick manila folder, heavy with generations of signatures and notarized stamps. Inside, I found exactly what I hoped, a 1936 survey proving the McAllister land extended into Willow Lake well beyond the dock. The county had updated zoning in the 90s, but due to a grandfather clause, our rights remained intact. Karen was bluffing, overreaching, illegally. I didn't go to the HOA, not yet. Instead, I emailed copies of the documents to the county land use office. Then I drafted a formal complaint with photos, property lines, and her ridiculous fines and sent it to the regional homeowners oversight committee. I even copied the local newspaper. By noon, I'd stirred the pot. At 6 p.m., my inbox pinged. Greater than complaint received. Pending investigation. Temporary freeze on all HOA issued citations requested. We will contact you for follow-up. I walked into the living room where Grandpa was watching the lake like it might disappear. They're looking into it, I told him. He didn't smile, but he nodded. Good. About time someone did. That night I sat on the dock alone, line cast into the water, feeling the pull of something deeper than fish. Karen had made a mistake. She thought she was dealing with just another stubborn old man, but she forgot something critical. This wasn't just about a dock or a fishing pole. This was about legacy and the grandson, who wouldn't let hers erase his, and by the time she realized that, it would be too late. Karen struck back like a hornet disturbed. The very next morning, another violation notice landed in our mailbox, this time for unsightly shoreline vegetation. Grandpa's cattails native, harmless, and beautiful. She wasn't even trying to hide the vendetta anymore. By noon, a contractor showed up with a weed trimmer and a clipboard, claiming he'd been hired by the HOA to beautify the shared lakefront. I blocked him at the gate. You step 1 inch onto that dock, I said, and you'll be explaining yourself to the county assessor and the sheriff. This is private property. He left fast. Word was getting around. Neighbors began asking questions not just about our situation, but their own. Karen's grip had been iron, but it was also brittle, built on fear and silence. And now cracks were forming. Mr. Ramirez gave me his old HOA meeting minutes, handwritten copies dating back 15 years. In them, I found a golden thread, the 25-foot buffer zone Karen had weaponized. It was part of a proposed amendment. It had never been passed, never ratified, and certainly never enforceable. She'd built her campaign on a lie. Armed with the truth, I compiled a 12-page report, scans of surveys, quotes from county records, testimonies from neighbors who'd been similarly harassed. I titled it, The HOA Mirage, How a President Created Her Own Laws. I printed 20 copies and walked door to door, handing them out with a single sentence. You deserve to know how your community is being run. People read, people talked. That Saturday, Karen held an emergency HOA meeting in the community clubhouse. I went, so did nearly 40 other residents, most of whom hadn't shown up to a single meeting in years. She stood at the front of the room in a lavender blouse, eyes cold and voice clipped. Before we begin, I'd like to remind everyone that HOA matters must be discussed respectfully. Personal grievances will not be tolerated. I raised my hand. Is that in the bylaws, or did you make it up like the buffer zone? Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Karen stiffened. I'm sorry, Jake, she said. But you're not a board member, you don't have the floor. I took a step forward. I don't need the floor. I have the facts. I handed copies of the report to every board member and began reading from the zoning documents. My voice didn't rise. I didn't need it to. Truth carries its own weight. You've cited Section 1 for B repeatedly, I said. But there is No legal jurisdiction beyond 5 feet of shared shoreline in HOA land. Our dock isn't on HOA land, never has been, and your enforcement of non-existent rules is not only unlawful, it's abusive. Karen's face turned a dangerous shade of red. This is misinformation. The board, I interrupted, has been misled, intentionally. Then I played the final card, a letter from the county land use office addressed to me, read aloud for all to hear. Upon review of the submitted evidence, we find no legal grounds for the homeowners association to enforce lakefront restrictions on the McAllister property. Any fines issued under this premise should be considered void. Continued harassment may warrant investigation. Silence. One by one, the neighbors turned to Karen. Mr. Parker stood up. You fined my wife $200 for her rose trellis, said it cast a shadow on community harmony. I was enforcing aesthetics, Karen muttered. No, said Mrs. Hanley from the back. You were enforcing control. Karen tried to regain composure. This is all being taken out of context. These are isolated. They're not isolated, I said. They're a pattern, and patterns can be broken. A voice I hadn't expected spoke next. Grandpa, he'd been sitting in the back row, hat in hand, silent until now. He stood slowly, spine straight, voice clear. My father taught me to live by the land, to fish when the sun is rising, to leave things better than I found them. We welcomed this neighborhood when it came. We've watched families grow, but I won't watch it turn into a prison guarded by paper. Applause started with a few, then spread like wildfire. Karen looked around and saw what she feared most, controlled slipping. The meeting ended with murmurs of a recall vote, and in that moment, I realized we hadn't just defended Grandpa's right to fish, we had started a revolution. 2 days after the HOA meeting imploded, Karen tried to regroup. She sent out a mass email under the subject line clarification of recent misunderstandings, filled with carefully worded deflections and veiled warnings. She claimed external actors had disrupted the harmony of HOA governance, and insisted her actions were in the best interest of the neighborhood. But the curtain had been pulled back. No one bought it anymore. Signs of change appeared. Immediately, residents who once kept their heads down started speaking up. The Greens rehung their blue door without asking. The Parkers put wind chimes back on their porch. A dozen homes placed potted flowers, lawn ornaments, even small benches near the lake. Defiant and joyful, Karen's carefully curated world was unraveling. Then came the petition, led by Mr. Ramirez. The recall proposal moved fast. In 3 days, they gathered enough signatures to force a vote on her removal. The board scheduled it for the following Monday. Until then, Karen retained her title, but the authority had drained from it like water through a cracked bucket. Still, I wasn't celebrating yet because what mattered most hadn't happened. Grandpa still hadn't returned to the dock on Sunday morning. I found him in the shed oiling a reel that hadn't seen daylight in years. The old Fenwick rod leaned beside him, carefully restored. She won't last much longer, I said. Grandpa glanced up. She already lost. Then why haven't you gone back? He didn't answer right away. He set the reel down and wiped his hands on a cloth. Because it's not about me anymore. It never really was. I sat beside him. It started with you, and it's only right it ends with you. He looked out the window toward the lake. Then I guess we've got work to do. The next morning, the day of the vote, something extraordinary happened. At sunrise, neighbors began gathering on our lawn. No fanfare, no speeches, just quiet, respectful presence. Mr. Ramirez brought donuts. The Greens brought coffee. Even the Hanleys came, folding chairs in hand. And then Grandpa stepped out, rod in one hand, tackle box in the other. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. He moved slowly down the path, a little stiff in the knees, but his back was straight, and his gaze never wavered. I followed close behind. Every eye was on him, not out of pity, but reverence. When he reached the dock, he paused, removed his cap, and placed it over his heart. Then he stepped onto the boards like a man coming home after too long away. The dock didn't creak. It welcomed him. He cast his line into the water, and for the first time in weeks, the lake was silent again. No HOA notices, no police cruisers, just water, sky, and peace. Behind us, someone started clapping. Others joined. It wasn't loud or showy. It was earned a thank you to a man who never asked for applause, just his place that evening. The vote was held in the same clubhouse. Karen had once ruled like a queen. I didn't go. Neither did Grandpa. We didn't need to. By 8 p.m. The results were posted on the HOA bulletin. Greater than HOA President Karen Whitmore recalled. Vote 84 in favor, 7 opposed. She was out. Within 48 hours, the board elected an interim president, Mrs. Hanley, who immediately declared a freeze on all pending fines and promised a review of every policy. Karen's house went dark. The blinds stayed shut. A for sale sign appeared on her lawn the following week. She left without a word, no apology, no goodbye, just silence. The same kind she tried to force on everyone else. We renamed the dock, not officially but in spirit. A neighbor carved a sign from reclaimed cedar and placed it at the entrance. Greater than McAllister's Landing, built by hand, protected by heart. Grandpa didn't say much when he saw it, just smiled, shook his head and said, "Bit fancy." for a fishing dock. But the next morning, he was back out there before the sun, line in the water, humming that same old tune. Peace had returned to Willow Lake, but more importantly, so had dignity, because in the end it wasn't just about property lines or fishing. Right start. It was about standing firm, and when the current turned rough, we didn't drift, we held the line.